Nadine has a really beautiful vision of bringing together people from all four directions to honor our relationships and to think about our connections with the elements that we are made of. So it's been a real pleasure to, learn from other artists and just to see this work evolve through different phases.
For me, it was my own healing as well, because I had to begin looking at where I wanted to go as an Indigenous woman, but also the reality is to move ahead to accomplish what I want cannot just include Indigenous people. That there has to be some type of relationship or understanding built. As being the population of only 4% Indigenous, that to move ahead when we're talking about saving Indigenous ways of life on the land also has to include other people.
In the Chinese astrological cycle, the elements play an important part in the rotation of cycles in time. And so I was thinking about how to integrate those elements into the poem, but also thinking about the long term, how we're just like a slight, small glimpse into this much longer cycle that we're part of. And I think the poem is trying to help us remember that.
O'Dara is one of the artists. He didn't get the message of me changing the direction of the colors on the base outline of it. And I said, I kind of like it that way. When I look at it now, I said, because there's red on the bottom of the chest, there is yellow on the side, there's black on the side, and there's white on the top. And he looked at me, I said, because that's actually how I feel that we're being walked on. And I had already closed the back end of the Jeep. And he goes, wait a minute. He goes, let me see. And he looked at it. And he goes, no, you guys are the strong ones. You guys are the ground. You're the strength. He goes, you're our foundation. I just gave myself goosebumps right there. And then that's what hit me, because in those senses in the connection between artists, I could be in a moment of just seeing it in a certain way where it could actually be flipped over in a different way that is actually empowering.
We're so interconnected in a way, but then also reminding myself of there's the myth of solidarity amongst people of color, and then there's the actual allyship and solidarity that can occur. So I feel like for me it was so exciting to not be in isolation and to still be able to show a piece of my own story and my own community's stories and see how that echoes across the different aspects of the chest.
You got to remember that back in the day, artists were held in really, really high esteem here on the West Coast, because they're the ones that visually preserved the culture. And they also probably very much preserved the oral history that went with a lot of the cultural items that they made. And so without that, a lot of the cultural protocols and stuff may fall by the wayside, because you don't have anyone reproducing them anymore.
Hey, I'm taller than you.
You are. That doesn't upset me,
No.
No, why would it?
I've always been taller than all the boys.
For me, when I lost my grandmother, my mom really wanted me to paint hummingbirds on her frame for her picture, because it's like an animal that represents healing. So I was like, okay, it's gotta be a hummingbird, but I'll just do my own twist on it. This is the hummingbird's eye and the beak and the tail. I love her work. There's also symbolism in the wings and the line work.
My grandmother played a key role in helping me become the person I am today. Without her, I would have never had these opportunities I have now. And because of her, I have a responsibility and an obligation to represent not only my mother's legacy, but my grandmother's legacy and our legacy. Having a sense of a responsibility and an obligation to care for the land and nature is vital to each and every one of us.
My connection with the community chest is a personal one. As a, for myself as an artist, it was part of grappling with the complex layers of my family's history over 500 years and relationships with indigenous peoples of this land and other settlers that involve sometimes agreements and treaties, also stories of violence. So the poem begins with, if my ancestors hurt yours, and your ancestors hurt mine, how do we move past things broken and torn apart?
One of the themes is healing, right? The violent tearing apart of families is something that colonization has actively inflicted on Indigenous peoples. And as somebody who's not Indigenous but is of Asian and specifically Cantonese descent, I feel like there's a lot of violence that has happened that I can't change. But what I can and must change is my response to that violence. So hearing people's stories and responding to them is really important, that they not go forgotten, that sacrifice and that trauma not be ignored, that it be centered, that it be held up, that the processes of healing that I see, when Nadine brings her grandkids into these events, it's such an amazing feeling, because these are things that colonization actively tried to kill and remove, and Nadine and her family are still practicing all of the things that colonizers tried to kill out of her family. And so to stand with her, to be in dialogue, to be learning, to be humble, to be paying attention, and to ask, given all of this that we've inherited, what's a better way forward? How do we move together gently, but also strongly together? This is what the chess, I think, invites us to do.